until a couple years ago, one of the biggest divides in the legislature was starting to become the urban-rural divide, more so than the Republican-Democrat, liberal, progressive, conservative divide.
Really?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So you've seen like bits and clips of like, the podcast or the show. What does the room look like to you? Like watching, like from what you've seen? Is it smaller than what you like thought it would be, or?
No, I feel like it's about the same size as what I thought.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've always wondered because people say that there's a science to like positioning cameras and like creating a set and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So oftentimes they're much smaller than what people would think. I went to New York once to the NBC tower and saw like the set of SNL and stuff, and Jimmy Fallon.
Rockefeller Center?
Yeah, the Rockefeller Center. Yeah. Did I say is that the NBC tower?
It's the NBC Universal.
Yeah.
But it's still Rockefeller Center,
yeah,
I think.
Rockefeller, where they have the big Christmas tree, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wild because the set of SNL is small.
Really?
Like that room is
so
tiny.
Many different stages and stuff. I imagined it was massive. Like I feel like it took up a whole floor of the building or something.
Well, the building is huge.
Yeah.
And like I saw the set for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon or like the Late Show with Steve Colbert or all those people. Because it's all in like the same building and some of them are on the same floor. So imagine like walking through here and like seeing different sets like that.
That'd be pretty cool.
It was wild. That room was so small. I was like, this is much smaller than what I thought it was going to be. I don't know if you see like the big gallery space downstairs. When you like, you'll see when you walk out because there's like big glass windows and stuff, but it's like that size. It's really small.
That's
it's
surprising.
Small.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to have you on, just kind of get your opinions and in your thoughts on different things like that, because from the message that I sent you, I said, we're trying to like talk to more people and stuff like that. And I see you inside of All Politics is Local and things. I've seen you engage with the content. So I thought you'd be a fun person to have to kind of just, chat with.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, of course. And we used to work together at Best Buy.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably one of the best jobs that I've ever had. I mean, I love what I do now, but I really enjoyed working there. Did you?
Yeah, I learned a lot. I'm still talk to some people that we used to work with back in the day.
Same.
Yeah.
Best Buy Mobile. When did you leave?
I was only there for about 6 months.
Really?
So it would have been February or March of 2015. That was my post-deployment job.
Okay.
Yeah, I got back from Afghanistan, and I had enough savings to live until the next semester started in January.
Mm-hmm.
I got back from Afghanistan in August of 2014, and I was so bored out of my mind because all my friends either had jobs or were in school, so they couldn't hang out, and I was just sitting alone at home watching TV and taking naps all day, and I was going stir crazy. So I got a job at Best Buy, one, so I wouldn't eat into my savings so much.
Sure.
And two, to have something to do with my time and people to be around and things like that. And I really liked it. And that employee discount was not bad.
That employee discount was insane.
Mm-hmm.
I really missed that. And being a part of Best Buy Mobile, we had additional perks. So like if you got like a phone through like one of the phone plans, they had like employee like discount lines.
Yep.
I was paying for my family's phone service. Well, me and my nephews. So I think for the four of us, it was like $120.
Pretty good.
Unlimited talk, text, data for AT&T.
Yeah, that's really good.
And I feel like AT&T wasn't like the most popular one back then. I would say definitely Verizon, if you remember. But, I stuck with it and it's good now. So
yeah.
But that employee discount was really cool. That was really awesome. But we were all part-timers. Mm-hmm. The only people who were full-time were kind of like the leadership team, right? Yeah. Like managers, supervisors, team leads, stuff like that. But yeah, icebreaker, which I feel like that was an icebreaker. But icebreak question, because I like to do this with everybody. If you could swap lives with any fictional character for a day, who would it be and why?
That's a good one. That's a very good question. Any fictional character.
It could be, I don't know if you're like into comics or into like Marvel. Mine would be like a Marvel character, but like anybody. Be from a book.
Got to be somebody from Lord of the Rings. I'm thinking Aragorn, son of Arathorn.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Did you read the books?
I did read the books. I read the books in high school right before the movies came out.
So I have like the whole leather bound set.
Oh, nice.
But I have not read it because it looks like a whole lot. It looks daunting. It looks tasking. It looks like too much.
Once you get started, you'll roll into it.
Yeah.
It's really an engaging. I mean, Tolkien was such a fantastic writer. He went into such detail on things. He really draws you into the story.
For sure.
Yeah, you could start slow and just read The Hobbit first, because it did come out before Lord of the Rings, and it is a prequel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not a prequel, but The Lord of the Rings was a sequel.
Yeah.
Because The Hobbit came out first. But you could read The Hobbit first.
Yeah.
And then you could read Lord of the Rings. And if you're really nerdy, take a bunch of notes and have maps and charts and references, then you could read The Silmarillion.
Okay.
Which I have not read. I own it. I haven't. It's on my to-be-read list.
Yeah. I have like 100 books on my to-be-read list.
Yeah, me too. I buy like 2 books a month, and I read 1 book a month. So it just keeps growing.
Yeah. One year I had this challenge. I was like, in October, I'm going to read 10 books. And I got to like 8.
That's still really good.
I was like, I didn't meet my goal, but I still read like thousands of pages,
Mm-hmm.
Which is really amazing. And I used to be an avid reader in high school.
Me too.
And one time, like, I got like in trouble. Like, my mom yelled at me because I read like a 400-page book in like 3 days. She's like, your brain is going to explode. Like, that's not. I'm like, I think I'm going to be fine. She's like, no. Don't ever do that again. But I stopped reading for a really long time. And it's kind of like a sad reason why I got back into it. Like, after my dad passed, I never used to have like trouble sleeping. But like going through that experience, like I found myself suffering from like insomnia sometimes.
Yeah.
So the only way that I would kind of like help that would be to read. So I'd be like reading until like 2, 3 in the morning. And it would kind of like help, It was
How
a
long
form
ago
of
was
therapy.
that?
2021.
Okay, so that's still pretty recent. I'm sorry for your loss.
Oh, thank you.
I can imagine how hard that is.
Thank you. You find ways to kind of cope. I don't know if cope is the right word. You find ways to kind of like go on, like trying to honor people's memory and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the grief will always be with you, but you learn to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, it is what it is. But one thing that brings me a lot of comfort is knowing that we like fulfilled his final wishes and where he wanted to be like laid to rest and stuff. So that's
really nice.
That really helps me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to get to know your journey in public service and politics and stuff. So because I'm quite the nerd, like I did a bunch of research and crafting these questions and stuff. But so you've worked in the Unicameral and then later as chief of staff for the state treasurer. But I do want to hear about your experience in Afghanistan, if you don't mind sharing, like how that was. Like, what was your assignment?
Yeah, the two are actually pretty closely tied because it was during my time in Afghanistan, and I was there in 2013, 2014. So this was 12, 13 years after 9/11. And even at that point, I mean, the war went on for another 7 or 8 years after that before the U.S. fully withdrew from Afghanistan, which is we need a whole separate show.
Yeah.
But even at that point, it was like, we've been in this war for a really long time. And what do we have to show for it? 9/11 was this long ago.
Mm-hmm.
We had caught bin Laden by that point.
Sure. Yeah.
But I realized that I was living the effects of politics in real life. My life was a consequence of what had happened because of politics. And I had been a little politically involved when I was younger, but not really. I was voted.
Sure. Yeah.
For what that's worth. But
that's worth a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I decided I wanted to get involved in local politics when I got back, whether that was at the city level, the state level,
Cool.
Just to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed public service in the military, and I wanted to continue public service in my community at home when I got back.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what led me to get into working in public policy.
Mm.
But to answer your question, in Afghanistan, I was a supply specialist. And this was part of the drawdown. At this point, everybody was saying we were going to be out of Afghanistan within the year. We'd turn things over to the Afghan government, and we'd have like a limited U.S. presence that was left there. And to some extent, that did kind of happen, but it was a drawdown. It was a drawdown, a closing of a lot of bases, what we call FOBs and COPs, forward operating bases and combat outposts. And while those were being closed down, the equipment and materials that were there needed to be centralized, and those were centralized at Bagram Airfield and at Kandahar down south. I was at Bagram, and I was in charge of the sensitive items department.
Okay.
So that was anything that we couldn't just turn over to the Afghans. There was a small economy that was built up by the U.S. taking old wires, metal, plastics, and turning them over to the Afghans to be sold as scrap. And there were Afghan contractors who bid on these contracts with the U.S. government so that they could resell this scrap metal and earn a living. But anything that we couldn't just turn over to them. So that would be anything like U.S. weapons, ammunition, uniforms of the U.S. and allied nations, communications equipment. And so our priority with these things, it was called the Recovery and Demilitarization Department. And I was in charge of that department at Bagram Airfield at the Retro Sort Yard. Anything we couldn't directly turn over to them, our goal was first and foremost to get it to U.S. forces in country who might still need it, whether that was communications equipment, uniforms, ammunition, armaments, whatever. Because if we could get it to them, we could get it to them within a day or two, regardless of where they were in Afghanistan. Whereas ordering it shipped over from centralized U.S. warehouses in the U.S. or even in Europe would take a week or two.
Okay.
So we could get them necessary equipment in a very short period of time. Our primary customers at that point were the people who were still going in on combat patrols and getting directly involved with fighting insurgencies. So route clearance patrols, special operations forces, quick reaction forces. Those were our three primary customers. If they no longer needed this equipment in country, we would find out what its replacement cost would be. If the cost to ship it back to the U.S. and put it back into the U.S. inventory supply system was less than the cost to replace it, then we would ship it back to the U.S. It would go back into the supply system and could be reissued later. If the cost to ship it, let's say it was a large piece of equipment that wasn't actually that expensive, so the cost to ship it back would be prohibitive, we would destroy it in country. And we had different levels of destruction that were necessary. That's what the demilitarization part of that department's name came from.
Okay.
So some things might be like hard drives. You know, a used hard drive isn't worth much to the military. So those, you just take a drill through it. Other things had to be melted down.
Sure.
Some things had to be dismantled, and certain specific parts had to be destroyed before they could be turned into the full scrap that we turn over to the Afghans. So that was my job.
So could there be like equipment that you guys could just like, you know, instead of shipping all the way back to the U.S., like shipping to another part of the world that's closer to where you guys were, where troops were stationed, that could use that equipment?
That's a question that's kind of above my pay grade. I was an E4. I was a specialist at the time, which is one rank above private, if that makes sense. I was below a sergeant, above a private. I was a specialist. So I just kind of had my job and my mission, and I carried it out. And we worked with the people on the ground that knew what they were doing, and kind of hoped that everything would work out.
That's interesting, because it'd be like, hey, we could just like ship it next door because, you know, they could use this. But I don't know. Maybe they did that. Maybe they did it. But what was that? Did you like that experience? I mean,
I liked it a lot. I actually got to be I got to be so familiar with the different types of equipment. And some of this equipment, it required different levels of storage before it had been destroyed or shipped back. So depending on what its level of sensitivity was, it might need to be under double lock and key at all times unless immediately being used or whatever. And the Army's CID, Criminal Investigation Division, if you think of military police as like regular cops, this Criminal Investigation Division are kind of like the detectives of the Army's criminal justice system. And the CID guys actually took me out on a couple of missions to Kandahar and to it's up north.
I'm not familiar with that geography.
Anyway, I did a couple missions down to Kandahar and up to Fob Venti. And at those places, I went out with them, and we looked at places where different equipment was stored, and I kind of gave them guidance on whether things were being stored appropriately or inappropriately. So I was kind of a narc, I guess.
Which, because you meant, so I guess you probably have a lot of thoughts on like the pullout and stuff like that. Because if you were in charge of like kind of like making sure like this equipment was like safe and secure and stuff, and from what I gathered and, you know, from the reporting, there was just like a lot of like high level equipment that was left behind when the US pulled out.
I don't remember the exact date, but from the day before the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan to the day after, the Taliban went from having the second largest military in Afghanistan to having like one of the most well-equipped militaries in the region. I mean, they had helicopters, they had Bradleys, they had tanks, they had Humvees, they had MRAPs, and mine-resistant armor-protected vehicles, kind of the successor to the Humvee. They still have them. They're flying our helicopters today. The Taliban is.
Well, I was gonna say this might be an ignorant like question, but isn't like could they like operate? Is some of that equipment like easily operable? I don't imagine a lot of that.
You couldn't put me behind the seat of a helicopter and have me operate it.
Right. Well, I mean like a like.
But there were a lot of people in the Afghan military that we trained, and I don't know if they have joined the Taliban, stayed in the military. I don't know how much of the ANA and the ANP remained in the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police. I don't know how many of them stayed on with the Taliban or if they weren't able to flee.
Gotcha.
I have no idea. I'm not a expert on the Middle East by any means. I just worked there. Don't ask me. I just work here. But I would imagine that they probably found some people who could teach them how to fly helicopters. I mean, they have relationships with other nefarious governments around the world. So I sure that they found people.
Scary situation.
Yeah.
So you came back and you said you always wanted to get involved in like local politics, continue making a difference however you can because you really enjoyed, public service. Mm-hmm. What about like the specific senator you went and worked with? You've only worked with one specific senator, right?
I worked for two senators.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I started my career in the Capitol. Actually, I started my career in the Capitol as an intern with a lobbying firm.
Okay.
It was called O'Hara Lindsay. Now it is Lindsay Har McDonald. They just went through a rebranding. They have a couple new partners. But I got an internship there, and that would have been in the spring of 2015. And the thing about jobs that open up in the legislature is they don't make it onto the state jobs website.
Okay.
If a senator has an opening for an administrative aide in AA or legislative aide in LA, they'll just kind of email other senators and maybe staff and say, hey, there's an opening in my office. If there's anybody who you know from your campaign or from your network, send them my way.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to know people in order to get a job in that world. So having been that internship with the lobbying firm maybe got me some contacts in the building who then started forwarding me those emails. And I applied for about 3 different jobs with different senators before I was hired as the administrative assistant to Dan Hughes from Venango. He was District 44, way southwest corner of Nebraska.
Okay.
He had I think he had the second largest by land volume district in the legislature. This was before redistricting. And I worked as his administrative aide for a little over a year. That would have been from November 2015 till January of 2017. And while I worked for him, he was meeting with different people running for office who were running for the legislature. It's pretty common for people who are running for legislature to meet with sitting senators who they hope to serve with and kind of get some ideas, maybe a couple campaign hints, tips and tricks.
Right.
And there was a guy who was running unopposed named Tom Breezy who met with Dan Hughes. Okay. And after the meeting, Dan told me that he had given a recommendation for me to Tom Breezy to hire me as legislative aide. And so I sent him my resume. We met at the Miller Time Pub in the downstairs of the Cornhusker.
Right.
I had a burger. I don't remember what he had. I think he might have had a Reuben. But we met. We had an interview over lunch. It was very informal. He offered me the job. I accepted.
On the spot?
On the spot at the end of the interview. Yeah, okay. He said...
we want you on board.
He said, I've asked you a lot of questions, and I have one more. Am I the kind of person you think you'd be comfortable working for? And I said, yes. And he said, do you want to plan on that then? Just very to the point. I really appreciated it. I think I had gotten a few people had heard about my application and had put in a good word for me with him.
Yeah.
But I don't think either of us regret that. He kept me on his entire 7 years as a state senator. And then when he was appointed as state treasurer by Governor Pillen, he came to me and he said, Edward, you've always been my confidant and sounding board, and you've always done a great job running my office. And I'd like you to continue to do that for me in the treasurer's office. And there was a little bit of discussion over a couple of days, and he met with the governor and a couple other people and asked them what kind of position he thought I should have, what the title should necessarily be. I think he had in his head what I would do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
I'd be his right-hand man. But there was already a deputy treasurer. And so he didn't know if he'd make me another deputy treasurer. The previous state treasurer, John Morante, had 2 deputy treasurers.
Gotcha.
So that wouldn't have been unprecedented, but he decided to go with chief of staff as my title.
What was that experience like working in the Unicameral?
It was amazing. Yeah. Every day was different. You know, and even throughout the day, I've had ADHD since I was a kid.
Sure.
And one of the cool things about it was, you know, I'm working on tax policy, and right around the time I started to get bored about talking about, you know, researching taxes, I'm done, and now it's time to research child welfare statutes. And so you're just switching gears constantly, looking up and learning about all kinds of different things. I learned about windmills. I learned about aquifers and groundwater. I learned about tax policy a lot. Tom Breezy was, I don't think anyone would argue with me on this point, that Tom Breezy was the #1 proponent for property tax relief in the legislature during his tenure.
Is that so?
I mean, property tax relief was his #1, 2, and 3 priority.
Right.
He did other legislation. He looked at rural workforce housing. He did some legislation on that. He did some legislation on parental rights for parents with disabilities. He did legislation on a lot of different things, but every year without fail, his personal priority bill would be a property tax relief bill. And that was a lot of the meetings that we had. That was a lot of the research that I did for him in terms of building spreadsheets, looking at different areas of the budget and where we could, or tax other areas of tax law where we could find new ways to raise revenue to fund property tax relief. So there's probably nothing else that was a higher priority for him.
I feel like that's a constant like battle. Property tax relief. We hear that every year.
Yeah, and you know, property taxes keep going up.
Yeah.
A lot of it's driven by the increase in valuations across the state.
Sure.
You know, as home prices go up, you have an option as a local school board, city council, county commissioners, NRD board to hold your budget flat and lower the levy rate. So, you know, if you have a $100,000 house and your house goes up by 20%, you as your taxing entity can decide to lower their levy rate by 20% so that you're paying the same amount of taxes every year. Their budget stays the same and everybody's happy. Or you could say, I didn't raise taxes. I didn't raise the levy. I mean, you didn't raise the levy, but your budget went up and the amount of money you're collecting from homeowners went up.
Yeah.
And from business owners. And from farmers. And as valuations have gone up across the state, and that's cool to some extent, the valuation increases. There was a period, you know, a few years ago when there was really, it was white hot. Houses would go on the market and they'd be sold within a couple days.
Are you talking about like 2020, 2019?
Yeah, 19, 20, 21.
And that's when interest rates were also like the lowest they've ever been.
Yeah, so, historically low interest rates. Housing values kept going up. And ag land, it's been about a 20-year problem of ag land prices going up, people buying agricultural land, sight unseen sometimes even, out-of-state investors buying agricultural land, and that just drives up the cost of ag land for the producers that want to live and work on a relatively modest-sized family farm.
That's wild. I still kick myself about not buying a house then. I guess I wasn't like in the #1 like best financial position to do that, but I was like working toward it because I was working in corporate America at the time. I was working for a pretty large company here, working toward buying a house. There's this one house that I still drive by. Should have been me to get that house, but
yeah. And there are a lot of programs for first-time home buyers too nowadays, both federal and there's some legislation in the state legislature right now to create a tax-advantaged savings account for first-time home buyers. You could put in up to $10,000 a year over a period of up to 10 years. Now, this is only a bill, and it may not go anywhere, but I think it's a really neat idea. You could save money for your first home over a 10-year period, up to 10 years, $10,000 a year that you would get tax advantages on.
Who was the introducer?
Oh, that is a good question. I want to say it was Dungan. I could be wrong.
I feel like that could be right because I remember him saying something in passing that sounded similar to that. So I'll go back and check. 10 days of bill introduction, man, can be a lot.
Oof. Yeah, I mean, typical year, your first that 10 days, it's 800 or 900 bills that get introduced in that 10 day period. So Although I don't know, there's a new 20 bill limit, right?
There's a 20 bill limit, but there's a proposed rule change to take that off.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. What do you think about that? What do you think of like limiting it to 20 bills? I could understand for like efficiency and trying to get things moved fast and really force people to focus on like what their main priorities are. But then again, it's also like, you know, maybe there's more than 20 bills that could really help your district.
Yeah. And I think if you have the bandwidth, both yourself and within your staff, to introduce 40 bills, you know, I mean, former State Senator Justin Wayne, who is a great guy, a brilliant man, business owner, attorney, wears many hats. He introduced, with all he had going on in his life, I mean, he would still be in court cases as an attorney when the legislature was in session, and he would introduce more bills than anybody else every year. And many of them passed. And I don't know if that was in response to Senator Wayne introducing so many bills.
Like the ratio, you mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who. I don't know if it was. I don't know if the impetus for that rule change was triggered by anybody. But I mean, Senator Wayne was very successful with introducing lots and lots of bills.
Yeah.
And he had the staff and he had the personal bandwidth to deal with that and write all those committee statements and all those introductory statements and do all the research that was needed and line up testifiers and do everything that's required. I think if a senator wants to do that and their staff are willing to put in all that work, power to them.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think Treasurer Breezy, when he was a senator, ever introduced more than, I want to say 17 bills was the most we ever did in a given year, which seemed like a lot for us. So I think 20 is a lot. But there's some offices that could go above and beyond that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily important to limit that, but I'm just a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
I'll leave it up to the elected officials to decide how they govern themselves.
Yeah, dude, that takes a high level of operation to be able to like do that and keep up with all of that. And you do your research and stuff. You have to have a pretty effective staff to be able to like do all that and help and prep and stuff. And the more that I've been at the legislature and like I would talk to different aides, it seems like such a fascinating place to work because the experiences that you have and the people you get to meet and the people you get to talk to. I don't know. Did you guys get a lot of like phone calls in his office just about?
Oh, all kinds. You get phone calls from, my favorites were the constituents, the people who actually lived in District 41. They were the people of District 41, both before and after redistricting, because in redistricting we lost Pierce County, Antelope County, and we lost Garfield County.
Okay.
And we picked up portions of Kearney County and another county that I'm blanking on. I shouldn't be blanking on it, but we picked up portions of two more counties, basically the suburbs, the areas of rural Nebraska that are around Kearney and Grand Island. We picked up, and we lost those three counties up north. But both before and after redistricting, the people of that part of the state are just wonderful people, by and large, very nice. Every once in a while, you'd get a little old lady who'd call because the county had hit her mailbox with a plow and she wanted justice. And she said, I want the senator to yell at my county commissioner. Well, technically a senator doesn't outrank a county commissioner. He may be elected by a larger group of people, but he can't tell the county commissioner what to do.
Right.
And we'd politely explain that, and most people would go, oh, okay, well, I still think somebody ought to do something. And I'd go, I'm really sorry for your loss of your mailbox. And you would get calls from mentally ill people.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theorists, people like who think that the sheriff's out to get them, and the sheriff he sends his patrol cars by my house twice a night, and he's been stalking me, and something needs to be done, and you feel for these people because you know that they need mental help, but I'm not the one to connect them with those resources. Those are some of the harder calls to deal with, the conspiracy theorists and the mentally ill people, but those were few and far between. A lot of the time it would be people who would have just legislative ideas. And sometimes they'd call in the middle of session after the 10-day limit, the 10-day window has closed.
Yeah.
You can only introduce bills in the first 10 days, and after that window, they would call, and so you'd have to kind of tell them, well, we'll have to try next year. We'll put a pin in it. I'll take some notes. I'll be in touch in September, and we'll start working on it.
Which feels like years for some people. Like, oh my gosh.
Feels like a long time, yeah, especially when you have something that might be pressing. Yeah.
That's wild, too. I think that a lot of people, it took me a while to understand like how the legislature works, you know, like not a lot of people are like in tune with local government like that. I mean, besides people like who are political nerds, which I guess I would classify myself as one now, but just knowing that like, hey, there's a set amount of time to do things, rules can change each year. I mean, that's wild. I think voter education, is really important for people to know, like, how their government operates, which is cool. But I've heard the same thing from other staffers where they get a lot of calls with people who ask for things that a senator necessarily can't do.
Yeah.
That's kind of outside of their, wheelhouse or their realms of power. But
you'd even get occasional people who would call about federal issues.
Yeah.
Now sometimes it's as innocuous as the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare being a federal program, Medicaid being a state block grant funded. Yeah. I mean, there's federal funds that go into Medicaid, but it's a state program. But sometimes you get people who would call and ask if your boss was going to vote to impeach President Trump. And you'd have to explain that he's a state senator.
Not a U.S. senator.
You'd have to call. And I felt bad about this because I had friends that worked in the U.S. senator's offices, but I would give them their number. Like, you're going to have to call Senator Fisher's office, or at the time Senator Sass's office. Here's the number.
Wow.
And I'd oftentimes maybe call him up and say, hey, if you've got somebody who's going to be giving you a call.
Isn't that wild?
Mm.
What was the transition like going from working for a state senator to the state treasurer?
It's been very interesting because I've had the same boss for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So it's the same boss, different job. The transition was actually smoothed out very well. Former Treasurer Morante resigned, and Treasurer Breezy didn't start until October 1st or November 1st of 2023. I should know this.
A lot has happened too. I mean, like...
Yeah, I want to say it was October 1st.
Yeah.
But there was about a 2-month period where there was no state treasurer. And so during that time period, the governor entrusted one of our program directors, Rachel BR, to be the person sort of in charge of the running of the office. And she worked in conjunction with the deputy treasurer, Jason Walters, to sort of make sure things kept running smoothly. And they really smoothed the transition for Treasurer Breezy and I. We had a lot of meetings with them and with various department heads within the Treasury, in his Senate offices, in his legislative offices, his state Senate offices. He was chairman of the executive board at the time, so we had a nice big office with a big conference table, so we could meet with people, which was nice. Sometimes when you're a senator, you end up in one of the bowling alley rooms, and you and your staff are kind of stuck in terms of trying to find good meeting places.
For sure.
But we met with people, we came up with plans and things, and we learned about the different programs in the office. He already knew quite a bit about it from having served as a state senator. I had not known very much about everything the treasurer's office did and does prior to that, so it was a steep learning curve for me. It was a bit of a learning curve for him as well, because of course there's intricacies to the office that you only know when you're the office holder or you work in the office.
Sure.
But all of the staff there, the majority of the program directors have worked in that office for something like 15, 20 years. They're all very smart. They're all very good at their jobs. They made it very easy for us to have a smooth transition, keep the train on the tracks, and sort of pick the ball up where it had been left off.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Was there anybody else because there's only 2 LAs or aides that work with each senator. So did anybody else like come with you guys?
No, it's just me. I was, when Treasurer Breeze was a senator, he had a number of different administrative aides, legal counsels, and committee clerks, depending on what his chairmanship was at the time. So each senator only has one legislative aide and administrative assistant. But a chairman will have at least one legal counsel, and then sometimes your administrative assistant is also your committee clerk. That was the case when he was chairman of general affairs. So we only had a 3-person office then. But I was the only staffer that was with him the entire time. And so there was that sort of sense of continuity, I think, that he wanted to continue.
Yeah. And trust, like, I'm stepping into this new role. Like, I need somebody who I know, has been there with me, like, yeah.
Yeah. And I think he knows me really well. I know him really well. We have a great working relationship. I would consider us friends as well. He may think otherwise. I'm kidding. No, but we have a great relationship.
That's good.
And so it was, it was, like I said, it was an easy transition.
So I do want to talk a little bit about like policy and stuff. So as chief of staff, to the state treasurer now, so you've had a front row seat, I guess, to Nebraska's fiscal policy. Like, I guess, what is your, from what I heard, the state is already in like a $400 and some million deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that transition in your role? Like, what can you like teach me about that and like what the state can do about something like that?
Well, from the treasurer's office, there's not much we can do.
Uh-huh.
The legislature controls the purse strings.
Sure.
So we only move the money in ways and places that we've been directed to by law, by the statutes that the legislature has passed.
Okay.
You have the forecasting board that has forecasted that $400 and something million budget shortfall for the next biennium.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the number 1 and 2 issue, I think, on the plate of the legislature in this session that's just started. The governor wants property tax relief. There's a number of senators who still want property tax relief. There's a lot of Nebraskans who still want property tax relief.
I think everybody wants property tax relief. You know?
I mean, it's everybody should want property tax relief. Homeowners, of course, want it. Business owners, of course, want it. Agricultural producers, of course, want it. Renters aren't too excited about it. Here's the thing. If property taxes go down, is your landlord going to lower your rent? Probably not.
I don't think so.
But if property taxes keep going up, is your landlord going to not raise your rent? Also, probably not. If your landlord's paying an extra $100 a month in property taxes, is he going to pay that out of his own pocket, out of the goodness of his heart, or is he going to raise your rent by $100 a month? And property taxes keep going up. Rents keep going up. Now, can a landlord just jack up his rent for no reason? Of course. But is he definitely going to do it if property taxes go up?
Yeah.
Also, of course. So, while it's not going to result in rent relief for renters, it's going to at least stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
And then it also stops it for, like I said, the homeowners, the ag producers, the business owners, commercial property owners.
I don't know. I think we're in a place where just like rent prices are never going to come down.
No, I don't think they're ever going to come down. I think the best we can hope for is for them to stay relatively flat and let inflation bring wages up.
Yeah, because I don't want to rent forever,
Yeah.
And like I pay rent in like multiple different places, right? Like, so I have like my place where I live, and then I also have like this place, and like both places are going up. So it's like, you have stopping the bleeding would be a good idea, but I mean, I don't know. I guess like if I were ever to move out of the place that I'm renting, maybe like if they got property tax relief, they would list it for a lower price, I guess. I'm not sure. But then again, why would you if you're making that money, right? Like, oh, now I can like increase my profits by this. But I don't know, banking on people to do things out of the goodness of their heart, like here. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Do you have like any ideas like what the legislature could do? Like, have you thought about it? Like,
I was at a luncheon today where the governor spoke, and he had talked about wanting to reduce the state budget across the board. It sounded like, and I don't want to quote him or misquote him, but it sounded like he sort of made it sound like a lot of times in the past, people would say, all right, well, such and such agency was budgeted $1 million. They only spent $800,000. We're going to cut their budget 10%. We're going to set their budget at $900,000. I think what I got out of this, and I could be wrong. My take was that if they had an agency with $1 million budget, and I'm just making these numbers up, there's very few agencies with a budget as low as $1 million.
Yeah.
But $1 million budget, they only spent $800,000 last year. He wants to set them at $800,000. So to really keep things tight, which as long as the agency spent $800,000 last year and they don't expect some new costs to doing what they're required by statute to do, I think that's a pretty decent plan. I think the governor's he's a very strong fiscal conservative. We have a lot of good, strong fiscal conservatives on the Appropriations Committee. And Chair Clements, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, is a good, strong fiscal conservative. So I think there's going to be a lot of tightening when it comes to the state budget. And from that, I think there will be room for probably not the ambitious programs that some senators have introduced.
Such as?
Like the savings program for renters saving up for their first home. I think that there's going to be a lot of bills that are going to die by what's called death by fiscal note, which is if you're, and that was the situation that we were in very early on in Treasurer Breezy's tenure as a senator, when the state's budget wasn't as flush as it was his last couple of years.
Okay.
And so when you're staring at a budget shortfall, having a fiscal note at all means your bill is not going anywhere.
Yeah. that's kind of the wild thing too. And I know there's like a lot of social programs. I mean, that renters program, but other things that people are concerned of getting cut and losing funding for. I mean, and then when like the prices of things go up, or maybe whatever inflationary policies could be coming down the pipeline from the national level. I don't know. It sounds like, I mean, it doesn't sound like a bad idea of like, right? Like analyzing previous budgets, seeing, okay, we didn't actually spend everything that was budgeted for, maybe we can like actually get by with a little bit less. But then couldn't that also be a double-edged sword? Like if things like kind of like surpass that?
Yeah, I mean, you can, and states have run into negative externalities when, I hope I'm using that phrase correctly, but they've run into unanticipated problems when they've cut budgets too far.
Yeah.
But the way our appropriations process works is the agency heads will come to the appropriations committee. They'll plead their case for whatever they want their budget to be. At the end of the day, it's up to the appropriations committee, and the governor does have a line item veto on the appropriations bill.
Okay.
So it's down to the appropriations committee. I mean, yes, the whole legislature votes on it, and there might be amendments that'll come and go in the appropriations process from the whole legislature, but the vast majority of it is going to be what comes out of the appropriations committee, and then possibly line item vetoed by the governor. Once passed by the whole legislature, we'll kind of have to see.
Yeah. Learning a lot. Some things I just don't know. So thank you. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, the property tax relief conversation, it seems like something that for some reason feels like it's never going to end. And I've heard people say, like introduce new industry. My solution would be to like build a theme park and maybe have that kind of like offset it, but increase tourism. I don't know, like find ways to like be creative about it, I guess.
That is one of our problems in Nebraska is we are not a heavy tourism state, so we don't have tourism dollars to offset.
Yeah.
All we have is property taxes for local government entities. We have income tax and sales taxes for local and state, and the income taxes for the state alone. So the state can only run on income tax and sales taxes. There's some excise taxes and a few other things that round out the edges, but the majority of the state's budget is income and sales taxes. And sales taxes are wonderful in a state that has lots of tourism because you can lower your income taxes sometimes to zero. Texas has a lot of tourism. Texas has, I think, pretty reasonable property taxes, and they have no state income tax. A lot of their state's budget is run off of their sales tax. And your citizens of your state, yes, they pay the sales taxes, but so do non-residents of your state, people who don't vote for you.
Yeah.
People who don't have a say in whether you get reelected. So you take and you lower the property taxes and the income taxes of the people who do have a say in whether you get reelected, and then you're taxing people who don't have a say because they're coming in from all kinds of other states. Hey, who cares what they think? Let's tax them. We do have I-80. That's a bit of a revenue generator. As people stop here, they buy things, they buy gas, they buy snacks, they stop and stay at hotels along I-80.
Sure.
But that's about the extent of it, and that's a drop in the bucket. We don't have Mount Rushmore. We don't have beaches. We don't have mountains. We have the Sandhills, which are beautiful. I love the state of Nebraska, and I was fortunate enough a few years ago to participate in the State Chamber's Leadership Nebraska program. We got to go to Shadron. We got to go to Kearney and Grand Island. We went to Norfolk and Columbus. We went to Lincoln. We went to Omaha. We got to see the whole state just about.
Sure.
It's a beautiful state, and there's a lot of really cool stuff to see that people just don't know about.
Yeah.
But until somebody makes a show about how cool life is in the Sandhills, I don't think tourism's going to be booming here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as wonderful as it is.
I'm telling you, man, we need to build a theme park, an amusement park roller coaster.
We could just, there was that proposal to flood a whole bunch of the area in between Lincoln and Omaha and create a massive lake to compete with Okoboji and Lake of the Ozarks.
I thought that passed.
It did. Although I don't know if it's ever going to happen.
Why?
It's expensive.
I thought they had the money to do it.
I don't think that was fully funded.
Seriously.
No, I think what was fully funded was the water project out west.
Okay.
It had to do with the water that Colorado owed us from like a 100-year-old lawsuit or something. My boss didn't serve on the Natural Resources Committee, so I didn't pay super close attention to that. You'll have to forgive me.
Yeah, no, you're
I want to say that was the Perkins County Canal. That's what it was.
okay.
I think that was fully funded, but I don't know if the lake project was fully funded. I could be wrong because that wasn't a bill that I personally worked on.
So I'm curious about your experience in the legislature. So you came in 2015, you interned as a lobbyist. You saw like how the spirit of the unicameral, like nonpartisan, people working together. And I feel like historically speaking, the unicameral, I don't want to say it was much more of a boring place, but I feel like the issues that they faced were kind of just like more apolitical, the things that they handled, in a sense. Not very controversial, right? Like property tax relief, supporting farmers, strengthening the state, like addressing brain drain, kind of like stuff like that doesn't generate like a lot of hype, I feel like. But what are your thoughts on kind of just like the trend, how things have kind of gone at the state and national level?
Yeah, I mean, the state level political discourse is a microcosm of what we've seen at the national level in terms of political discourse. Mm-hmm. And it's really sad because, when I was working for the legislature, I had friends. I'm a Republican. Mm-hmm. I worked for Republicans. And I had plenty of friends who were Democrats who worked for Democratic state senators. Mm. And we'd have to work together on bills our bosses agreed on, mm-hmm. Which happens more often than you'd think.
Right.
And we'd go out for drinks after work. We'd go to Billy's. We'd have a couple drinks, and we'd complain about, oh, my gosh, did you hear what so-and-so said? Oh, what a buffoon. I'm glad he's on your team. Hey, yeah, well, but so-and-so's on your team. Oh, dang it, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't like that. And we'd rib each other and stuff, and we'd hang out. And, you get these angry phone calls from people who probably don't have a single friend who's in the other side of the aisle. Mm. And I think that's something we've lost in our country. I think about some people in my own family who have cut out everybody. I don't want to say who, but who've cut out everybody in their mm-hmm. lives who don't agree with them politically. And so they're living in an echo chamber. And yes, when you have friends that are on the other side of the aisle, are there going to be things you're going to have to say, we're just not going to talk about that because we're never going to agree on it. Mm-hmm. Things like abortion, things like gun control. No one's going to change their mind on those major, massive issues. And so it's best just not to talk about them. But that doesn't mean we can't still be friends. We can't still work together on the things that we do agree on that will make our state and our country a better place to live for all of us. Mm. I think there's more that we agree on than we disagree on, but we lose sight of that because of these talking heads on television and these angry celebrities that try to divide us so that they can get more clicks, likes, and views. Hmm.
It's like we lost a mutual respect for each other on things.
People are forgetting that the people on the other side of the aisle are human beings. And that's on both sides. It's important to remember that the person who disagrees with you on almost everything politically genuinely wants to make their community and this country a better place. Just like you, they just disagree on the right road to get there. We all have the same destination, right? Mm. A better country, a better community, a better state. We just disagree on the route we're going to take. And if we sit in the car and we just fight about the route and we never put the shifter into drive, we're never going to get there.
But sometimes, like, I get what you're saying, right? But I don't know. I feel like sometimes what a Republican might think would be the best country would be completely different than what somebody else would, or like a Democrat would.
Maybe in terms of some things like youth sports, LGBTQ issues, sure. But in terms of people being able to afford housing, people having good paying jobs, people being able to afford groceries without breaking the bank, people having happy kids, those are simple things that I think we can all agree on.
Like the apolitical stuff. Well, like the things that are not very, I mean, what, like the American dream values, right? Like, I guess would kind of be the better way to put it. I mean, like being able to like keep a roof over your head, have a good paying job, secure family safety, XYZ.
Yeah, safe for retirement, have a safe country, free of terrorism, have low crime rates. Mm. We all agree we want low crime rates. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants a safe country. Everybody wants Americans to make more money than anybody else in the world.
So then I have this question too, because I've seen more and more bills that are more polarizing be introduced here at the legislature, right? At the local level. And sometimes do you feel like when those are focused on, it actually harms people on the same team?
Oh, it's absolutely harmed them. And it's harmed other good bills that the people who bring the divisive bills have introduced.
Yeah.
Right? I can think of a few examples. I don't want to say anybody in particular, but, you know, when somebody brings a bill that's just, that they know is going to be divisive, I think sometimes they don't understand that that might tank all their other bills. And they might get that one big divisive bill across the finish line at the expense of everything else they're trying to do. And it might cost some good bills from some of their allies to not make it across the finish line either, that might not have the full support, but might have gotten somebody from across the aisle to come over, but now they're not going to because you voted for this thing over here. And for some people, that's worth it. That in their minds, that calculus is worth it. They're okay with that.
Okay.
But I think some people don't expect that when they first come to the legislature.
Right. I guess, like, for instance, let's say, I was like in the car driving the other day, and I'm like, let me think about it from this perspective, right? Let's say I have an issue that my constituency sent me to the legislature to fix. Okay. And maybe it's a huge divisive issue that people are dealing with, right? Like, let's say my district hates ice cream. And they're like, you know, we want to send you to the legislature to ban ice cream because we think it's too high sugar content, this and that. It's not good for people, right? Like, let's focus more on healthy options. And my friends who are on the same team as me are just like, yeah, like, I agree that, you know, maybe we should ban the ice cream. I don't know if maybe this analogy will make sense, but then my friends whose constituency sent them to do something completely different, and maybe it's not like a hot button social issue, that constituency loses out on their senator being able to provide what they want for them because they feel like they have to support their colleague in this. So that's what I mean by, like, people missing out on being able to, like, serve their districts or constituencies. Because I mean, like, an issue in a more urban area is completely different than what's, like, more in a rural area.
Yes, absolutely. And until a couple years ago, you know, one of the biggest divides in the legislature was starting to become the urban-rural divide, more so than the Republican-Democrat, liberal-progressive-conservative divide.
Really?
Yeah. And it wasn't on every issue, but it really, I think, came to the fore with LB 1107 in 2021.
I do not remember that bill. So you'll have to kind of, like...
It was a big, big, big bill. That year, the big discussion was between... Was that 20... No, it was 2020. I'm sorry, it was 2020. But anyway, that year, there was some money that was available for the legislature to spend. And the division came down to whether it was going to go to property tax relief or income tax relief. And I'm going to generalize here. There are people in urban areas there are people in the cities who want property tax relief, and there are people in the country who want income tax relief. Did I say that right?
Or do you mean backward? Other way.
But the majority of people in the cities, it was the majority of people in the cities that wanted the income tax relief, and it was the majority of the rural people who wanted the property tax relief.
Yeah.
That's the majorities worked out. And there was fighting, and everybody was saying, okay, so we had two good bills. Here's the property tax relief bill. Here's the income tax relief bill. But they didn't know which one they were going to put up first because nobody trusted the other guys to vote for theirs if this one had already passed.
Yeah.
And so there was quite a bit of urban-rural divide that came to the fore in the legislature during that year. What ended up happening was they got smushed together. Well, not that year. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of it anyway. The Nebraska's Business Incentives Act was going to expire, and the businesses, mostly in the cities, wanted a new business incentive. It's the Nebraska Imagine Act. Okay. That was what got smushed together with the big property tax relief bill. I'm sorry, it wasn't income tax relief. That was a couple years later.
Okay.
But there was also an urban-rural divide when the income tax relief and property tax relief were both up at the same time as well. I started to misspeak there. I apologize.
No, you're good. Yeah, I did not know about that. I'll have to I mean, I guess it's over now, but I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But I mean, like, that's a fascinating take on it, right? Like, urban issues and rural issues are completely different sometimes. And even if you might be a Republican from an urban area or from a rural area, and once again, your constituencies might be sending you there to do something completely different.
Yeah. The priorities of urban and rural, and there's not, well, Dan Quick's from Grand Island. He's a Democrat, and that's, some people might call that rural. I don't really think of it as rural because it's Grand Island. It's still a city,
Right.
but there really aren't rural Democrats like there were even as short as 10 years ago. Kate Sullivan was my boss's predecessor in the legislature for District 41. She was a Democrat from rural Nebraska. You don't really see rural Democrats anymore, but there are urban Republicans, and a lot of times the priorities of those urban Republicans can vary, not across everything, but in certain specific policy areas can vary quite drastically from your rural Republicans' policy priorities.
So, kind of okay. So, being a Republican, and knowing a lot of fiscal conservatives in the legislature and stuff, how do you balance kind of being able to maintain that fiscal conservatism, but also making sure that we're fully funding things like education, infrastructure, things like that? I mean, stuff that could cost a lot.
Yeah, well, the governor has been a big proponent of when he lists out his top priorities, the number one thing he always says is kids. It's always his top priority. The legislature created an education future fund that they put $1 billion into a year or two ago to fund education in the schools, which the hope is that will help drive down property taxes. Because for most people, more than 50% of your property tax bill, and if it's not a majority, it's a plurality of your property tax bill, is your schools, your K-12 schools. So if we can find ways to improve outcomes for kids at lower costs, that'll drive down property taxes. And if the state can put more dollars toward our K-12 education in the state, that will help kids and drive down property taxes. Nebraska, over the last 10 years, and I don't know the stats for last year or the year before, but in the last few years anyway, Nebraska has ranked near the bottom in terms of state support for K-12 education. And we're ranked near the top in terms of property tax costs. What a surprise. And so there is a move there has been a great movement in the state to put more dollars into K-12 education. And there was some legislation that was put in place a couple years ago so that as those schools get more dollars to educate our kids from the state, they have to reduce their property taxes by a similar amount. So if you're a school with $1 million a year budget, you get an extra $10,000 from the state, you have to lower your property taxes by $9,000. So you still went up $1,000. That accounts for inflation or whatever. And you can override that with a vote of the people or a supermajority of the school board. And so there's been work to both put money towards schools and make sure that money yields property tax relief while making sure kids get a good education. And one of the things that was recently done, this has been about 2 years ago now, my boss was the impetus behind it, was an efficiency review of state government. They hired an outside company to come in and do an efficiency review of state government top to bottom.
Okay.
The goal is not to cut costs no matter what it takes. The goal is to improve outcomes and reduce costs by finding redundancies, duplications, things that just don't work well to improve outcomes. And if you can improve outcomes, you can lower costs. Because if you've got 10 people who are working on something day in and day out, and one of them decides to leave and find a different job, and you find you're still able to work with 9 people and get the same amount of work done, that's a cost savings right there. If you're able to find a better, more efficient system, you might be able to take 2 of those people and reassign them to something else that's understaffed without having to hire more people. So you can drive your costs down as you improve outcomes. That was my boss's, probably his big final hurrah in the legislature, was getting the efficiency review put into statute.
Wow.
And funded.
When I was prepping for this, I was thinking about our time at Best Buy and just the level of customer service and kind of just the things that we offered. And it's gone downhill, man. I've always said customer service everywhere is like going downhill. And I think it starts with how kids are these days, like how kids are moving through the education system, like things people are exposed to and stuff. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm. I don't. I agree. I don't have too much else to say. You kind of hit it on the head.
I don't know. Have you ever? I don't know. Do you run through drive-throughs?
Oh yeah,
Right.
I'm a fast food connoisseur.
Yeah. So running through a fast food drive-through like 5, 6, 7 years ago is completely different than what it is today. I remember I used to work at Burger King in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very much so like, when you answer the drive-through, hello, my name is so-and-so. Thank you for choosing Burger King. Like, how can I help you today? Versus like today, you go through a drive-through and they're just like, order when you're ready.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. I guess I never noticed it because I'm so busy focusing on what I'm going to order, and I don't really notice the fact they just go order when ready. But you're right. That really is a big change that's happened in the last 10 years or so.
Or you pull up to the window and they don't even read your order back. They just be like, $10.70, whatever the price is, and then you take it. They just hand it to you. And I don't know. I feel like living in a hyper-connected world, especially digitally, like people have lost how to interact with people face to face. And I feel like we're close in age. And I feel like our age group was the last age group that really got to experience like a childhood that was not like shrouded in like digital, like social media and stuff.
We were the last group of kids to go out and play, and our parents had to be reminded, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are on the nightly news? And they go, oh, that's right, I have kids.
Like
they turn on the front porch light and okay, it's time to go home.
Yeah, I remember like if you wanted to like figure out where your friends are, you'd ride your bike around the neighborhood and see where all the bikes are piled out at. Yeah.
And all the bikes are in front of Mikey's house. So I know everybody's at Mikey's house and I'll run in there. Maybe they're playing GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or like we would go explore, like go to forests, build forts, things like that, go like 5 miles away.
Yeah, just go find junk in the woods and like decide it's a laser gun and pew pew.
Right. Like we used to have so much fun. And none of that's on tape. So it's like really cool. Like, we got to experience like life and nature that wasn't hyper focused on doing something specifically for social media or something like that, which definitely makes me sad with like kids these days. And, human interaction, if you wanted to play with your friends, what did you have to do? You had to go knock on their door. Most of the time, their parents would open the door and be like, hey, can so-and-so come play? Where are you guys going? Blah, blah, blah. Like, you knew who your kids' friends were.
Or you'd call them on their house phone. Mm-hmm. Hey, can Jazari come to the phone?
Yeah.
No, who is this? This is his friend Edward. I want to know if he wanted to go ride bikes.
But it's really sad that we're past that. And I don't know if that's ever going to come back.
I think the trend is, I think that parents are starting, and I'm not a parent, but I have a lot of friends who are.
Yeah.
And I think the trend is starting to move the other way. We got legislation in the state legislature this year that would require parental consent for children to sign up for new social media accounts. Australia just passed a law that anyone under 16 cannot have social media accounts. You're looking at legislation in a lot of states, including Nebraska, that would ban phones in schools. I think there's a trend to getting kids more unplugged. I think as the generation of millennials is becoming parents and is continuing to think back to our youth, our unplugged youth, I think there's more of a trend in parents in that generation and our generation who want their kids to be a little less plugged in. That's the vibe I get, but I'm not a parent. So I don't know.
So, okay, I have an interesting take. I read that one of my friends at the Examiner wrote an article about that. And it published yesterday or today, the bill introduced about, social media accounts and stuff. How could that possibly be enforced? The governor even like made a comment like, oh, I would definitely say no phones in bed. But at that point, it's just like, how much of that is like you getting into people's houses to parent their kids?
Well, and he made that same comment at the luncheon I was at today. He said, my rule would be no phones in bed. We can't legislate no phones in bed, but we can sure encourage it. I think he means just by giving speeches and saying no phones in bed. I don't know specifically. I never went to law school. I was so burnt out after all those years of schooling and education that
Wait, what did you study?
I was an English major.
Really?
I minored in political science, and I also minored in environmental studies. But I majored in English.
Awesome. I majored in journalism. Well, I hopped around, but I finished with journalism with a minor in English.
I also hopped around. I ended up, because I started out majoring in poli-sci, then I majored in environmental studies, then I majored in English, and I had enough credits from the other two to have minors in poli-sci and environmental studies. But I always loved reading. I stopped for a few years between sort of halfway through high school to the middle part of college. I didn't really read all that much. I think because my high school had sort of beat the love of reading out of me.
Yeah.
By forcing me to read so much.
Yeah.
But I came to find enjoyment in it again when I was in college, and so that kind of came full circle.
Sure. About the, kind of got off topic there, about the banning social media or not allowing saying that kids have to have parental consent, like if they're between the ages of what they say, 14, 15, 16 years old to have a social media account?
I think it might have been 16. If you're under 16, you need parental consent to get a new social media account.
I don't know. Do you think that do you think that's even possible to how do you enforce that?
I think kids are going to find ways around it.
Yeah.
Like kids have always done. Kids have always found ways around our parents' rules and things like that. You know, I knew kids in middle school who smoked cigarettes. And that would have been 2002. You could still get cigarettes when you were 13 years old. Somehow. I don't know. I wasn't friends with them.
Right.
I was with the bad kids. I wasn't allowed to hang out with them after school.
Right.
Kids will find ways around it, but if it moves the pendulum, if it moves the ball forward, I think it might be a good idea.
I mean, I think it's sure. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think it's also kind of just I feel like that's I understand the need to protect kids, and we have the child protection COPPA as it is, Children Online Protection Agency, whatever they do, hold on, I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but to the point where I feel like parents already know what social media accounts their kids have, but it's also I
would hope so, but maybe not.
But it's also the parent is the one who gave the kid a smartphone and pays for said smartphone.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's you're already exposing your kid to this. And you saw it when we worked at Best Buy, people would come in with their kids and get their kids the latest whatever.
Oh yeah, $1,000 iPhone or whatnot.
So I mean I feel they already know. I feel giving your kid that piece of technology, you already have to know that they're able to see everything in the world with that.
Yeah. I think a great option would be to get a dumb phone, like a jitterbug for old people.
Yeah. Or a flip phone.
Or flip phone.
T9 text, yeah.
Yeah, because that was what we had back in the day.
Right.
And, that way you can still get in touch with your kid. They can still call you to pick them up after school when they're done with band practice. But they're going to have to be on the computer at home where you can supervise them for them to be able to get onto Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
I thought aren't Republicans for small government?
Generally speaking.
But doesn't that expand government's influence in your household?
I don't know how to answer that. I think conservatism, generally speaking, wants smaller government, except in places where the conservative majority feels that more government is a necessary evil. And I've always considered myself, there's a great podcast a few years ago, and I don't know if it's still, I think it went off the air. It was called The Conservatarians, sort of conservative libertarian, sort of mishmash type of people. They didn't quite identify as conservatives. They didn't quite identify as libertarians. That's kind of where I find myself personally. I generally want the government out of people's business. But I think no phones in schools is probably a good thing.
I agree with that.
For government to do.
I agree with something like that, because then that actually hinders learning outcomes.
Yeah.
Because I have seen insane failing rates surrounded by distractions of phones. you know.
Yeah, one of my best friends is a teacher, and she's echoed
yeah.
the same sympathies.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like, you know, banning social media for anybody under 16, maybe to protect kids, it's a necessary evil of an expansion of government. Because when you think about all the grooming that is going on social media these days, you know, anything we can do to stop that kind of thing is well worth it. I think there should be two separate prison systems, right? One for people we're ever going to let out. Somebody robbed a bank, somebody committed fraud, somebody did too many drunk drivings, but they're getting rehab. We're going to let them out. There should be comfortable beds. You know, you should be able to watch TV if you have enough. If you behave yourself, you should be able to have an Xbox if you behave yourself. The closer you get to release, the more liberties and freedom. Maybe even give you a smartphone the year before you get out, so you can kind of get up to speed with the real world, right?
That sounds like the Norwegian or Swedish. I was
Danish.
Really?
I think they all have prison systems like that, honestly. I think all like Sweden, Norway, Denmark.
They really focus on rehabilitation.
All of them have prison systems like that. And then the other one is for people you're never going to let out. Child rapists, groomers, serial killers. I'm kidding.
No,
I don't really think we should have two prison systems. I do think I'm on the board of the Mental Health Association of Nebraska, which works with a lot of people who've been justice involved, particularly people who've had substance abuse and mental health issues in their lives that have led to them being justice involved persons.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's really rewarding to see the great things that can come out of people who have sometimes done terrible things.
Yeah.
But have made it out of the justice system, and some of the people that the Mental Health Association works with are never going to get out, but they've changed their lives behind bars, and they're able to be a good influence on others who are looking to turn their lives around who will get out.
Sure.
And anything that we can do to reduce recidivism, which I think does come from a focus on rehabilitation rather than pure punishment.
For sure. Yeah.
I think is a good thing.
Because I feel like we lock so many people up, that new prison that they're building is instantly going to be overcrowded.
Yep.
And I don't think rehabilitation is not something that's even talked about enough to focus on. You know, I mean, like, what low-level offenses? I mean, I don't know. I've never committed a crime, but like, I feel like there are some things too that this person needs help. You know what I mean? Like, they could be a productive member of society if they got the help that they needed.
You would be surprised how many of the people that are behind bars have mental health struggles. And I can only hope that as we have more success stories that come out of the Mental Health Association of Nebraska, we're able to expand the programs we offer behind bars to people. Because the people that are involved in our programs, do some of them reoffend? Yes. But is the rate of recidivism, the rate of reoffending, is much, much lower in people who've participated in MHA programs than those who don't. And that's a nonprofit doing that work. So it doesn't necessarily have to be government. As long as government allows the nonprofit to come behind the bars and work with the people, most of the people that we're sending behind bars are themselves formerly incarcerated, who are going back into the prisons and jails and working with people to be like, it's not some guy with a PhD in psychiatry who the worst thing he did in his life was he got a B- on a paper once in college.
You're talking about people who made it out and like,
somebody who's been where you've been.
Yeah.
And they can look at you and they'll meet them at their level and they'll be like, listen, man, you effed up. I effed up. This is effing stupid. Here's how you're going to effing get your life together. They'll talk to them in the language that they feel comfortable with, and they're not going to sit there and read from the DSM-5 and say that, well, recidivism can be reduced by the hippocampus being enlarged. And,
right, for sure. And I think that's really important. That's important work, because that all feeds into trying to create a better, healthy society. Yeah. Let's unpack there. I mean, Nebraska's prisons they're not privatized.
No.
Okay. Because, I mean, some states have private prisons and they have an incentive to keep people there, but we don't have that.
I don't know too much about how private prisons work because Nebraskans are not, but
yeah, I need to look into that more.
Yeah.
Are you excited for Trump 2.0?
Yes.
What are you looking forward to?
I'm interested to see how things will go. Maybe some tax cuts. I'm looking
Okay.
forward to some tax cuts.
And what else?
I'm personally not a big fan of tariffs, but we'll see if those are able to, maybe as a looming threat, force some onshoring of manufacturing in the U.S. once again. I think that would be potential benefit to our country to have manufacturing jobs come back here.
But how is so I had to do more, I mean, I knew what tariffs were, but in some cases way back in the day, targeted tariffs were not necessarily a bad thing, right? So
right. Until we had an income tax, that was how the
Yeah.
majority of the federal government was funded, was with tariffs and excise taxes.
Yeah, and I like the argument to try to bring manufacturing jobs is not a bad one, right? I think we could benefit for having more American-made things, right? Somebody explained it this way, for instance, let's say you have a specific computer chip that's manufactured in China or wherever it is, and you tell American companies, right? Like for instance, maybe Apple, Intel, Dell, these tech companies, hey, we're putting a tariff on this specific item. We're going to incentivize you to actually make this before these tariffs hit. There's a timeline on where these tariffs hit, and there's also government incentive to these companies to make it, right? So it's okay, well, we'll subsidize X amount for you to be able to create this facility or update your facility to be able to produce this here. So there's ways to bring that manufacturing back. But from what I'm gathering in the way he's saying it, I mean, just a blanket tariff on everything, I don't know how that's going to help. And a lot of the ways that these are manufactured, I heard there's whole cities or towns in China where everybody works at one factory that makes all of these things. So the speed in which to bring those manufacturing jobs here, it almost seems like a Herculean or impossible task. I mean, I feel there'd be just a sharp increase. But you said you were not a fan of tariffs, but I mean,
yeah. And I don't know how much of those threats are going to come to fruition. Could be all of them. Could be only a handful. I think we saw in the first Trump administration that people were wrong not to take Trump's literally. No, hang on. Let me get this right. People were wrong to not take Trump seriously, but people were also wrong to take him literally. You should take him seriously, but don't take him literally. And I think that same mistake was repeated in this last campaign cycle as well. I'm hopeful that there won't be blanket 20% tariffs on all of our trading partners that we rely on for the goods that we need to run our economy here.
But what if he does that?
That would be bad.
Yeah, I was researching different things that are imported from, Mexico, China, Canada. And one thing that blew my mind is that we import electricity from Canada.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
So the hydroelectric dams and stuff definitely help offset the northern states, the border states with Canada. And that allows flexibility in our grids to be able to, maintain good energy levels for everyone.
Yeah.
You probably remember when that cold snap happened in Texas and we had to divert energy, and there was a time here where we had scheduled, power outages because the grid was getting overheated. I mean,
yeah, there was a lot of anger with Nebraska utilities for joining. I think, what was that called? The Southwest Power Pool. The Nebraska utilities had joined in on. That was the reason for those scheduled blackouts, rolling blackouts, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
There was a lot of anger there. And I don't know if there was ever, I didn't pay attention if there was any legislation that ever came from that or any movement. But, our whole country is so interconnected. I think a lot of people didn't really know to the extent to which our electrical grid was interconnected with a place as far away as Texas.
Yeah. The more you know, right?
Yeah.
Canada's supply helps New York with their energy levels, Minnesota, Michigan, all of that. And it's clean energy too. I mean, they have dams that produce hydroelectric energy and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But what do you feel of just the state of the country?
I think I'm worried.
Really?
Yeah, the last probably 4 presidential election cycles, but more so the last 2 or 3, have been so divisive. And there's been a lack of healing that has come after those election cycles, where we can come together and try to be neighbors again and be like, hey, I was scooping my driveway or shoveling my driveway. I did yours too. You know, even though you had the wrong yard sign out for the wrong politician. I think there needs to be some kind of healing, or I don't know.
And I could understand why or how I could see, like, because people viewed Trump as the change candidate. Right? You've heard that, right?
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, after he won, it just felt like that healing, that moving on, that forward progression didn't happen, which was kind of sad to see, because you see people still, like, trashing Vice President Harris and stuff. And I'm just like, how is this conducive to, like, what this side wanted? You know what I mean? Like, your guy won. He's returning to power. Do we still need to, like, rage against, you know, the vice president who's about to be on her way out? And, you know, the worryiness about, is our country going to be able to heal from this? Or are these rifts so deep that they're not going to be able to be healed? Is something that I guess only time will tell. And I think it's up to, you know, the incoming president-elect. It's so weird to, like, I don't know what to call him. Like, in this, like, weird in-between time. Former President Trump.
Former President.
President-elect. Like, yeah, like, it's too many titles to, like, follow around. So, but yeah, so I definitely think it's up to him and his administration to try to, like, bring people together. I don't know.
The onus is definitely on him and his administration to be a president for all Americans, whether they voted for him or not. And we'll see if that happens or not.
Do you think he's capable of that?
I think he's capable of it. But the thing is, every president always says they're going to be a president for all Americans, whether you voted for them or not. Trump said that in his first inauguration as well, after the first time he won. But, you know, have any of them really? They pursue the policy goals that are popular with the people that elected them, not popular with the people that didn't elect them. And that goes back probably to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
You know, George Washington was probably the only president who was truly a president for all Americans.
And didn't he?
Except for the ones that were in slavery.
Yeah, which is awful.
That face.
Yeah. And, you know, interesting thing about George Washington is, like, he set the precedence of, like, stepping down from power.
Peaceful transition of power.
Peaceful transition of power. And that kind of patriotism, respect for, you know, the people, the government by and for the people, you know. I don't know. I mean, like, maybe I don't, like, agree with, obviously, with everything George Washington did. I mean, wasn't he, like, a slave owner and, like, all that kind of stuff? But to say, I mean, like, respecting the peaceful transfer of power, respecting, you know, the will of the voters, respecting just the everyday struggles that regular people go through, you know. And I feel like there's such a disconnect between that level of, like, politician on any side and just the everyday people. And to see whether or not our country is going to heal and move forward from this, and, you know, if we're ever going to get back to, hey, I scooped your driveway, you know, to help you out, is meant to be seen. But I do kind of want to just rant it out with the legislature one more time.
Sure.
You know, you talked about, like, healing and things, and, you know, I look at the chaos, like, on Twitter and stuff, and some culture wars that, like, bleed into the legislature. And I don't know if you saw, like, what happened with, like, the committee assignments.
I did. Yeah.
I mean, do you feel like at this point it's people just playing to win and silencing others?
I think it's important to be gracious in victory and defeat.
Mm.
And I don't think many people in politics take that attitude anymore
Mm-hmm.
on either side. I was reading the Nebraska Examiner and a couple other news outlets about the Committee on Committees struggle.
Mm.
And there's some people that are saying that was actually the Republicans were pushing back because it was the Democrats in the first place who kicked Republicans off the Committee on Committees in the 2nd Congressional District.
Mm.
And then they said, okay, well, if you're going to play that game, now we're going to play this game. I don't know whether that's true or not. That's just speculation that was in the press.
Shout out to that work, though. I read that article, too.
Yeah.
They do good work over there.
They do. I love the Nebraska Examiner.
Mm-hmm.
I donate to them.
Do you really?
Yeah, $5 a month.
Oh, nice.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I get their newsletter in the. I try to donate. I'm that guy who donates to Wikipedia.
Do you really?
Yeah, $1 a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to write for them.
Mm-hmm.
The Examiner. Good group of people.
Yeah. I think Aaron's going to do a great job as executive director.
Oh yeah, for sure. Editor-in-chief.
Editor-in-chief.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's what the title is.
Yeah. And Zach and I went to school together, and that trip I was telling you about to DC, we were actually roommates because it was a part of SPJ, Society of Professional Journalists.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we bunked together, and he and I are super cool. We talk, text, FaceTime here and there. If I ever have a question about stuff that I don't understand, like I reach out to him, and he's really like informative because he loved the legislature even way before he like went there. I think like he started like following it like heavily in high school and stuff, and was really in tune with that. But yeah, that whole thing, I hope it doesn't get to a point where it's like, okay, we're just never going to let any Democratic bills pass.
I don't think we'll ever get to that point. Because it's a nonpartisan legislature, if you cross your party and do something that they don't like, they can't take away your committee assignments. They can't take away your chairmanship. All that's voted on, the chairmanships are voted on by the whole body. And unless you've upset
in a secret ballot, right?
In secret ballot.
Yeah.
Yes. And so unless there's something you've done that upsets your constituents so much that they're not going to reelect you, you can cross your party as much as you want. And there's plenty of senators on both sides who did and do on a regular basis. Mike McDonald did. Senator McDonald did in his time. Senator Brandt has. Senator Crawford did. Senator Breeze even did on a couple of occasions. Not necessarily cross the party, but didn't necessarily do what everybody else in his party was doing on a particular bill. Mm-hmm. Justin Wayne did. Senator Wayne. So there's, and I could go on and on. I could think of, there's probably only a handful of senators who've only exclusively ever voted with the majority of their party on every single last little vote. Mm-hmm.
So you don't think the pettiness will be a problem?
Oh, the pettiness will be a problem.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, we're just going to like exclude you guys and force all our bills out without any help. Because Republicans don't need Democratic help to do anything anymore.
Technically, no. But I think the Republicans are still going to have a hard time getting to 33 on every last thing.
You think so?
I do.
Like what?
Yeah. I can't think of any specific examples off the top of my head. I would be shocked if all the Republicans voted in lockstep unity on everything that happens from here on forward. Because there's a decent number of Republicans anyway that are term limited that aren't planning on running for anything in the future who don't have to appease anyone but their own constituency.
What do you hope the impact you've had on Nebraska politics will be?
I hope a positive one. I know that Tom Breeze is a man who's a lot smarter than me, but I was able to help him get a lot of really good legislation across the finish line that helped parents with disabilities, that helped property taxpayers, that helped veterans, that helped people still in uniform, that helped teachers. We had a lot of really good legislation we did together in the 7 years that I worked for him. And I hope in the treasurer's office, I am able to help make sure that the people who are saving for their kids' college education through our Nest 529 program are able to get the best program that they can out of that. I hope I can help make sure that Nebraskans who have unclaimed property with our unclaimed property division, which you can find out about at nebraskalostcash.gov. That's nebraskalostcash.gov. Check it out. 1 in 5 Nebraskans has unclaimed property with our office. We have millions and millions of dollars of unclaimed property.
Seriously?
Yeah, 1 in 5.
Wait, so what happens with that property?
We hold on to it.
And then what?
Forever. You die, then your heirs are able to claim that property. Now they'll need your will, or they'll need to show that you died intestate, and depending on
you can't just run up and be like, hey, like
this guy was my uncle, and this is my money.
Right.
No, but your heirs are able to claim it in perpetuity.
How much is there in unclaimed property?
Oh, I should have researched that before I came to do an interview with the media. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's millions and millions of dollars.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
But that's an important role of our office. I hope that in my time in the office, I can help make sure that Nebraskans with disabilities are able to save for their needs with the Enable savings program. Mm-hmm. Another important program we have is the Child Support Payment Center.
Okay. So
if you go through a divorce or a breakup and you're the custodial parent, we make sure that the money comes from the non-custodial parent to you. And of course, if you're the non-custodial parent, then the other one can't say, oh, well, so-and-so never paid me my child support, because there's a record through the government that, yes, it came to the Child Support Payment Center. We paid it out to your ex. You're good. And then there's Treasury Management, which makes sure that all the wheels of government keep turning in the financial sense of the word.
Yeah.
So it's a very rewarding job. Right. And it's important in a number of different arenas. And a lot of people don't know everything that we do. A lot of people don't know that the Nest 529 College Savings Program is run by the Treasurer's Office, or that we have the Enable Savings Plan for people with disabilities, or that there's even an unclaimed property division of state government at all.
Yeah.
So we really try to get the word out about that.
Wow. That's a good one. That's very fascinating, because I know that, I've heard people talk about lost property or stuff that, property their family used to have, but it got lost here or something like that. So that's really fascinating. I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah, I actually, before I worked for the Treasurer's Office, I had seen some ads about lost property. And I'm like, oh, that's for rich people who have bank accounts that they lose track of. I've never lost track of a bank account.
Right.
That's my money. But I checked my name on a whim right after Treasurer Breezy was nominated to be to be appointed. And I found out I did have some lost cash. My last paycheck from Cracker Barrel, which I stopped working at in 2012, it was like a $7 paycheck. And I was like, I'm not going to drive all the way across town to pick up a $7 paycheck. They can just keep it. Turns out, no, they can't. They turned it over to the government, and it just sat there waiting for me.
They couldn't just direct deposit that?
This was before direct deposit. This was back when we got paper checks. Yeah.
Got to run to Walmart, and I remember I had to do that when I worked at Burger King. I didn't have a driver's license, so they used my school ID to cash a check at Walmart. Oh my gosh. Wow, you've come a long way. Gosh. So for young people considering a career in politics, what advice would you give them about making an impact?
Volunteer early and often. Get involved with college Republicans or young Democrats, young Republicans, high school Democrats. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah.
But get involved with the youth organization for your party. Volunteer for campaigns. Volunteer for campaigns that are in your community that you find passionate about. Read up on the issues.
Sure.
Go to their website, see which candidate. They might not be the candidate from your party. And it's in a city council race, it might be two people from the other party that are running against each other, and you need to figure out which one of them better aligns with your values. But get involved. Try to make a difference in your community. And I think volunteering for nonprofits also is extremely rewarding. I'll give young people that advice too, because that's just a great way to connect with other people who care about their community.
Right.
And you can make political connections being involved in the nonprofit world as well.
For sure. Good advice. These are just fun ones. What's your favorite comfort food?
Ooh, it depends what I'm in the mood for. I'm such a foodie.
There's not a one, something from your childhood that you always go back to that always
Kraft macaroni and cheese.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Cool.
The blue box.
Yes. Tommy was saying his is corn dogs.
It's a good choice.
Yeah. Gosh, I forgot the name, but we used to get those microwavable burritos. Oreos for me.
Okay.
I feel like milk and cookies.
Double stuff?
No.
No?
I'm not like, so I have an insane sweet tooth, but it's weird because like I'm not like a huge like double stuffed person. I'm not a huge like frosting person.
I like the mega stuff Oreos, the ones that have like triple stuff.
Edward.
Yeah. They're hard to find is the problem.
Are they?
Yeah, the mega stuff or super stuff, whatever they're called.
I feel like that's just taking just a bite of like cream.
Yeah. I 100% would do that.
That is, I can't do that. I really like the thin Oreos too. I just like the cookie aspect of it, but yeah. If you had to give a TED talk on something unrelated to politics, what would it be?
Ooh, the impact of the First World War on the 20th century.
That is very specific.
Mm-hmm.
You said the impact of World War II on the 20th century.
World War I.
World War I. Why?
I'm a big World War I buff.
Really?
I've been to the World War I Museum in Kansas City like 10 times. I have like 40 books about World War I.
Wow.
I have a collection of World War I memorabilia. I have like helmets, canteens. I have a bayonet. I have like letters to home that World War I soldiers wrote. I have a guy's discharge papers. I have medals.
Seriously?
Yeah.
And how'd you find this stuff? Like just through the internet, eBay?
Yeah, a couple things I found at antique stores, but most of it's been on eBay.
Garage sales?
Never garage sale.
No?
Yeah, hard to find World War I stuff at garage sales. That's more like Vietnam nowadays.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or even Global War on Terror.
Yeah. What's a song you know all the lyrics to?
Clint Eastwood by Gorillaz.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that one. What genre is that?
It's rap.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Spit something.
Finally, someone let me out of my cage. Now, time for me is nothing because I'm counting no age. Now, I couldn't be there. Now, you shouldn't be scared. I'm good at repair, and I'm under each snare, intangible. Bet you didn't think so. I command you to. Panoramic view. Look, I'll make it all manageable. Pick and choose, sit and lose, all you different crews. Chicks and dudes, who you think is really picking tunes. Picture you getting down in the picture, too. Like you lit the fuse. You think it's fictional? Maybe. Mystical, spiritual. Hero who appears in your clear view, and you're too crazy.
Wow. That was awesome.
And there's more lyrics, yeah.
Gosh. You want to know something crazy? One time I was interviewing Senator Bo Ballard about like other different bill or whatever. And people were talking about how he went to Lizzo. And he was like, man, I got an eclectic taste in music. I was like, really? He was like, yeah. I was like, let me see your playlist. So he shows me his Spotify playlist. It has all these different like artists and stuff. I was like, okay, cool.
Something you would not think about Tom Breezy. He's a farmer. He's from central Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
He's in his 60s.
Mm-hmm.
His playlist, when we have to drive someplace across town, usually he drives because his parking space is closer to the building than mine. Mm-hmm. And when we get in, his iPod just immediately starts playing on shuffle. Mm-hmm. He has got a lot. He's got like heavy metal. He's got rap. He's got country. But you would think like, oh, it's going to be a lot of country. But he's got an eclectic taste in music.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What's the wildest song that's come across? You're just like, okay.
Yeah, I don't listen to that much like country rap, but he's got a decent amount of that, and so I don't know the names of those songs.
Like what? Like Florida Georgia Line? Like
no, there was a Danny Boone featuring Pruno. I don't remember the name of the song, but I remember that the name of the artist stood out to me.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised what people's playlists, are. If you could teleport anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Someplace warm.
Really?
Absolutely. Like Hawaii. I haven't been to Hawaii since I was a kid, and I've always wanted to go back.
I've never been.
There's only 2 states that have never recorded a temperature above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Alaska. Okay.
Right.
That seems pretty obvious. And Hawaii.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So just Goldilocks temperature.
It's just perfect year round.
That's wild. Isn't like LA like that too? I don't know. Have you ever been to
LA gets godly hot in the summers.
Seriously?
Yeah. Pretty far south.
I guess I've never been there in the summer, but I was in Arizona in the summer in 2023. Oh my gosh, for work.
I have spent 2 summers at an Army base called Fort Huachuca, which is about an hour and a half south of Tucson. So it is on the Mexican border. Like this Army base and then a bunch of other federal land abut the southern border of Arizona. Mm-hmm. And both times the Army has sent me there, it has been like July, August, when it's like 110 degrees.
Wow.
And I had those like external battery packs for cell phones for charging them. I had one of those like melt in the car. I left it in my rental car. I mean, it wasn't liquid, but it was all bent and wavy.
Right.
After being in the car for like 3 hours at whatever the interior of the car might have been 140, 150 degrees. I don't know.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm a sweater.
Oh, me too. I sweat like a fat kid. I mean, I am a fat kid, so I sweat like a me.
Dude, I'm telling you, and I hate it too. And you know, I heard that people get actual like this cosmetic procedure where they like freeze their sweat glands so they don't sweat.
Botox. They'll Botox your sweat glands and they'll stop working.
But I feel like that's not safe.
They Botox their faces.
But I mean, you sweat like because it's a reaction.
Sweating serves a purpose
exactly
physiologically to the body. It helps you cool down. So yeah, I would not want to. As much as I get annoyed by like all the sweating that I do in the summertime, especially when I'm working out, I would not get rid of it because I don't want to overheat and die.
For sure, right? Because that would be not good. That would not be good, I guess.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Madeira? They call it the Hawaii of Portugal or of Europe.
I have. Oh, okay. I've heard of Madeira as like the alcohol.
No, I'm talking like Madeira, like it's an actual place.
Is it in Spain or Portugal?
It's in Portugal.
In Portugal?
They call it the Hawaii of Europe.
Ah, no.
Yeah. I've always wanted to go there.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah. Who's your favorite U.S. president? Past or present? I mean,
Abraham Lincoln.
Really?
I know it's like an obvious one, like a lot of people would say that, but he kept the country together.
Yeah. He had a lot to do. Yeah.
And when asked what if President Lincoln had any hobbies, Mary Todd Lincoln said, cats. And I relate strongly to that.
I've seen your cats online.
They're pretty cute.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever Googled?
Oh, man. Probably something embarrassing, like a really simple math equation. Like, you know, I've definitely Googled some stupid stuff like 12x2. Google will be like, it's 24, you idiot. And I'm like, yep, it is 24.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to double check to make sure it still is.
Double check.
Just make sure it's still that.
Like, I'm pretty sure they might have changed it.
Are you pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Really?
Yeah, I go crazy for Eggo waffles. And I have a little waffle machine. And I'll get Kodiak cakes, that high-protein pancake mix.
Okay.
And I'll make up the pancake batter, and I'll put in my little mini waffle maker, and I'll have like 2 little mini waffles. Nice little snack.
I go back and forth.
I'll eat pancakes. I got nothing against pancakes.
Right, yeah.
But if I had to choose, I'd go waffles.
Yeah, for sure. Favorite TV show you recently binged?
Futurama.
Really?
One of the smartest shows ever. They had like 3 or 4 different people writing on that show that had PhDs. It was a crazy smart show. And the beautiful thing about Futurama is it's the spectrum of humor. You've got fart jokes, and you've got jokes about like astrophysics that some moron like me is never going to understand. That just goes right over my head.
Right.
But an astrophysicist would watch Futurama and be like, ha-ha, I get that one.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something for everybody.
Yeah, I'm so into space shows, right? Like I love the Star Trek series.
Oh yeah, I love Star Trek.
But I'm talking about like the newer series. I'm talking like Star Trek Picard, Strange New Worlds, Discovery.
I haven't seen Strange New Worlds.
It's so good. I mean, it follows a SS Enterprise crew, but you know, different people. It's the same people, but like you know what I mean. It's like just like kind of like a revamp of like what they've done.
Did you ever watch Firefly?
Mm-mm.
Great show.
I have not seen that one.
Yeah, it's a space show. It takes place in the future, and then they made a movie. The movie was called. I remember if the movie was called Serenity and the show was called Firefly, or the other way around. but it was a great show.
Mm.
Really good. Canceled before its time. R.I.P.
Yeah. And there was another show that I liked called Terra Nova, which was so good.
Never heard of it.
And it was about like how they were able to find like a ripple. It takes place in the future. You know, Earth is like heavily polluted, things like that, overpopulated. And they find like a ripple in space and time to be able to go back in time. And so, yeah, I mean, like if you're not a person that kind of like likes that like stuff, it's like really out there, but it's super cool. And it shows like how they have to like build a community back then and like rely on like natural things with technology and stuff. It's a fascinating show. And there's also the show called The Expanse that I really like.
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
So good. It takes place in the future, a little bit more realistic. And it's like how humans have pretty much like conquered this. I don't even know if conquered is the right word, but like have spread across the solar system. Mm-hmm. So they have like people who live on the asteroid belt, people who live on Mars, people who live on the moon, obviously here on Earth. And it follows a crew of this spaceship called the Rocinante, and they go on like these missions and like combat like, you know, the powers that be and all that kind of stuff. But
so, do you know where the reference Rocinante comes from?
Mm-mm.
That was the name of Don Quixote's horse.
I did not know that.
And that was also the name of the camper RV thing that John Steinbeck rode around in when he wrote the book Travels with Charlie, which is a beautiful sort of look at America in the turbulent times of the 1960s.
Fascinating. But yeah, I really like that show and Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
Rings of Power. Have you been watching that?
Yes.
Are you caught up?
No.
Okay.
No spoilers.
Oh, man. That show is so good. But yeah, and I watch a lot of TV, a lot of movies. I go to the movies by myself a lot. It's just like watching TV, but on a bigger screen to me.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
I feel like people think it's weird. They're just like, you're going to go to the movies alone? And I'm like, I get that for some people. It's like this event and like, you know, they plan it all the time. Sometimes I'll literally be like, what's playing? And just like run to the movie theater to go watch it. But yeah.
Yeah, nice.
I also got into this show last night. It's called, you've heard of Love is Blind, right?
Heard of it. I've never seen it.
So pretty much you talk to somebody through a wall, you fall in love, you get engaged, sight unseen, which I thought it was funny because it's cringy to me. And so I don't know, but I came across on Netflix that they have this thing called Love is Blind Habibi, which takes place in Dubai. And it's those people, and it's all in Arabic. And obviously they speak English because some words don't translate, but it's been interesting to like watch a show and understand what they're talking about, like in Arabic. So I thought that was fun.
Do you speak Arabic?
Mm-hmm. Fluently.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I was born and raised here. I was actually born in Missouri, but raised here in Nebraska. But I speak Arabic fluently.
That's impressive.
Thank you. I feel like I got to use it more. Otherwise, I'm going to lose it.
Yeah, I took German all the way through high school and then in college as well. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say I'm fluent. I'm conversational. Mm-hmm. You know, like I went to Germany a few years ago, and I could get around. I could ask for directions and order in a restaurant and have light conversations. But if somebody wanted to talk about like geopolitics with me, like I don't know the German word for geopolitics.
How would you say, where is the nearest restaurant?
Oh, I'm blanking on the word for nearest.
Or close, what synonym would fit that? Or how would you like ask that question? Maybe not specifically like that, but like, yeah.
Gibt es etwas gute Restauranten in dieser Nähe? Are there any good restaurants in the area?
Wow. That's
I
wild.
think I got that right. Sometimes I got the gender wrong.
Yeah.
German is a gendered language, which I think is frustrating because like
Spanish.
It never and it never makes sense. It's like glass might be male, but cup is female, and you're like, oh, come on now.
Yo.
Get it together, German. But there is every Tuesday night when the college is going, there's a thing called Stammtisch, which is the conversation table down at Yaya's, put on by the language department at UNL. And you don't have to be a student to go. So I've been trying to, that's my goal for this year. It's one of my New Year's resolutions, except not really, because I don't really stick to those. But one of my goals for 2024, I'll say, has been to go to Stammtisch and just like practice my German with people, kind of like brush up, improve a little bit,
For sure.
keep that part of my brain healthy.
Love that. Yeah. I love learning new languages. I was learning Spanish and French.
Oh, cool.
I can understand Spanish more than French, but I wouldn't even say I'm conversational in French. Like, I would say, like, I know how to, like, ask very specific things, like, un café, s'il vous plaît, like, you know, bonjour, mon ami, like, you know, just regular, like, phrases, whatever, but
Yeah.
nothing special. If you had a time machine, would you go past or future?
Past and invest in Bitcoin.
I remember creating a Robinhood account in 2015 and seeing the price of Bitcoin. I'm just like, dang, I could have got in then. Do you have cryptocurrency?
No, I don't. Oh, well, I probably have $1,000 in crypto.
Yeah. I have some in cryptocurrency, but, you know, I'm not like a multimillionaire off of it. You know, it was just a fun thing to get into.
No, and the amount of crypto money I have, I think I started with 1,200, and I'm down to 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised that Bitcoin crossed over 100,000. That was wild. I remember when it was like, when it peaked at, what was it? 19,000 in 2017. And that was crazy.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
That was wild.
Yeah. But, yeah, I saved up my money for about a year, and I put about $1,000 into crypto and $1,000 into the stock market, both with Robinhood. And I just kind of hop on there every few days and
See where it's at.
buy stuff, sell stuff, maybe a couple times a month. And I've probably broken even, because I think I've lost about 200 in crypto in the last year, and I probably made about 200 on stocks in the last year. But it's like, I don't look at it as an investment. It's kind of like just a hobby.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's fun to watch the numbers move around and
Yeah.
fantasize about what would happen if something really took off.
Yeah. I was subbing at one school, and I was asking like the kids, like, you know, like, what do you want to do after high school? And one guy was like, I want to be a day trader. And I was like, oh, like on what? And he was like, oh, cryptocurrency. So we were like having this conversation about like cryptocurrency and like how he would like, you know, make that into like a actual like, you know, lucrative career or whatever.
Sure.
Lastly, I guess what's one thing on your bucket list that you haven't done?
I've never been to Asia.
Seriously?
No.
Me neither.
Well, I guess technically Afghanistan's in Asia, but I don't count that. That was a business trip. That was not for pleasure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would love to go to Japan and South Korea, maybe Vietnam, and I also would love to go to Africa.
Really? Where in Africa?
Probably any of the countries where they speak English as a first language.
Okay.
So like Nigeria, I think South Africa, most people speak English.
Yeah.
I don't know the others. My sister went to, I don't remember if it was Benin or Togo, and she really enjoyed herself there. So I might ask her which one of those she went to and throw that on my list.
I think they're right next to each other.
They are.
Yeah.
That's why I can't remember which one it was. Ghana, Benin, and Togo are all kind of right there on the...
And Nigeria, too.
And they're right in this part of the...
Yeah. You could, like, visit all those countries right there. But... So, watching that Love is Blind, Habibi, they were talking about Morocco, and one guy talks about how he, like, runs his family business in Casablanca. I'm just like, ooh, that seems like a place that I would want to go to. But yeah, I've been to Africa twice.
Oh, cool.
To South Sudan, which, yeah, was very, very interesting.
I imagine so.
They were so shocked, like my cousins and just places that we went, they could tell that I wasn't from there. So people would call me American boy. They could, like, just looking at me, they're like, yeah, this dude's not from here. They'd be like, hey, American boy, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's what they would call me, American boy. But they were shocked that I could speak Arabic as fluently as I could.
Yeah.
In some ways, much better than the cousins that I have there.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was wild. And somebody was like, yeah, like, you know, most kids who are Sudanese who are born abroad, their Arabic is much... Someone was like, they've heard much better Arabic from people born abroad than where they are in South Sudan, which I thought was fascinating. He was like, yeah, you know, most Americans are, and the UK Sudanese people, the UK South Sudanese people, Arabic, I guess, is top tier. So
That's interesting.
that's all. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Learned a lot. Really appreciate your perspective on different things, especially with the legislature and the unicameral. As we head into this legislative session, a lot of people are kind of like wondering what's going to happen. It's a makeup and kind of a road that I guess we haven't been down before, but glad that you guys are doing great work in the state treasurer's office.
I hope we are.
And those things.
I know we are.
Yeah. And for those watching or listening, if you have unclaimed property, I guess it wouldn't hurt to search her name up. Like, how do you find that again?
NebraskaLostCash.gov.
And what do? You just type in your name? And
Yep. You can type in your name, your friend's name, your family members' names. It'll tell you if, I can't remember what the threshold is. I want to say it's $200. It'll tell you if it's less than or more than $200. Mm-hmm. But you can at least find out that you have unclaimed property. And then you can call one of our friendly and helpful unclaimed property specialists. We'll walk you through the process and make sure that you get what belongs to you. And don't be afraid to search your parents' names, your siblings' names, cousins, aunts, and uncles. And you can call them up and be like, hey, Merry late Christmas.
Yeah.
happy late Hanukkah. I found you some unclaimed property that you own.
Yeah. Worth $1 million. How crazy would that be?
Crazy. Mine was $7, but maybe somebody watching will hit the big time.
Okay, so sorry, when you say unclaimed property, do you mean like actual like land property, or do you mean property just like monetary too?
Monetary. It's mostly monetary.
Mostly monetary.
The only exception is safety deposit boxes.
Oh.
So like, how if you don't, there's that show where if you don't pay your rent on a storage unit, they'll auction off your junk. Well, that doesn't apply to safety deposit boxes. There's a state law, safety deposit box, the contents will always be yours. So if you don't pay the rent on your safety deposit box, they'll turn it over to unclaimed. I think the bank will try to contact you first to be like, hey, come pick up your junk. And then they'll turn it over to the unclaimed property division and they'll hold it.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. Fascinating stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Learned a lot. Good. Edward Boone, thank you so much.
I learned a lot too.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you did. But yeah, hope to have you back sometime.
Would love that.
Yeah, me too. That's it.
Cool.
Next on the Jazari Kual Show, Kelly Ross, founder of Echo Collective, is empowering refugee and immigrant women through entrepreneurship and community. In this exclusive interview, she shares her story, mission, and impact.
That was a big learning curve for me, just learning about other cultures and adjusting my communication. But one thing I really noticed was that the women were craving relationships with American-born people and or people who had been in the U.S. long enough where you'd been kind of like Americanized and you knew the rules of the road. But the ability for them to make those relationships was completely out of their hands because people saw them as others. People saw them as, oh, you're a refugee, you're an immigrant. Yeah. I'm not really interested in being friends with you because you're like so different.
Right.
And so I started creating relationships within the women that I was with, and that was transformative. Like I saw how their lives changed and how their attitudes and their emotional states were completely different because they had friends.
Be sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications. This is one you won't want to miss.